and we're about to start the baraza right now on securing Black innovations and IP through blockchain. This calls on the heels of the keynote from Erica Alexander and her discussing that part of the reason entering into the blockchain space was that artists, as products are sold long after a series has ended, the original creators of those works usually don't get any funding from them, or it's very marginal as it goes down the pipeline. And so there's this interest in NFTs and other properties so that the creator can constantly be funded, so they don't have to scramble for funding to develop something new while we're cheerleading their products and their things from years ago, and they're not making any revenue from them. So this is a very timely baraza on discussing intellectual property and what this merger of this new economy is going to look like from the blockchain perspective. So without further ado, because I see all the panelists being piped in at the moment, let's take a minute for everyone to go around and speak for about 2 to 3 minutes, introduce yourselves and your background and how it's connected to the topic of intellectual property. So the first person I saw come into the room was Candy. So we're going to start with Candy. Then right after Candy, we'll do Rob, Pascal, and Troy, because I think that's everyone that's in the room. So take it away, Candy.
Thank you, Deidre. What an honor to meet you and be amongst all these gorgeous intellectuals. This is what I love about my Howard family. Wow. My name is Candy Nicole. I am the CEO of Productive Candy Entertainment based out of California. I graduated from Howard in 2008. Officially, though I was originally class of 06. And I earned my degree in economics. And I started out as a film major. But while I was studying film, I was learning the mechanics of filmmaking from the artistic perspective and the actual making of a product, which was very, very instrumental in my education. However, what I realized was, I don't have any money. How am I going to finance these projects? You know, you can have all of these amazing dreams and ideas and stories that you want to tell, but as you spoke to, Erica Alexander is very much on the front lines of having this conversation as well. So I'm glad you brought her up. We do not have a mechanism as Black creators to allow us to sustain the making of creative projects. So you might be lucky and know someone who has enough money to help you fund a project, but then it's done. You can't sustain yourself to be able to make another one or to follow up. I'm even seeing huge instances of very, very expensive projects such as Underground, where they might get a season out, they might even get 2 seasons out. But if the expense is $60 million per episode to be able to cover the cost of production, then the sustainability of being able to tell that entire story, it just isn't there. And what I'm also seeing is we come from, as Black creators, we come from a background that's, economically disadvantaged for a myriad of reasons. But what's really happening is there's a stranglehold of white supremacy, literally silencing our voices. And so you see a lot of slave movies being made because white people love being reminded of how good they are at enslaving us. But what they don't like to see is stories told from a perspective that actually empowers a narrative in which Black people are freeing ourselves. And so what's happening is you'll submit a script to a major production company, and they'll literally tell you either these characters aren't Black enough, meaning oppressed enough, in order to continue the narrative. I've even been told, your characters could really be anyone. So why don't we just change the characters white and then we can finance your project? And so I really see blockchain technology as a solution to empower me, to empower other filmmakers and storytellers and creators to break through the financial barriers that exist, which is really where the stronghold is, and allow us to actually tell stories from our perspective that gives us a wide range of humanity. So that's really where my expertise on the topic of intellectual properties related to the blockchain comes from. And I also have a background in banking and finance. Just want to throw that in there.
Good. Rob?
Oh, good day, everyone. Rob Campbell, Med Cybersecurity. I'm a consultant, chair, professor of quantum computing research for PhD students. I published papers on blockchain. The most recent project that I worked on was for a Silicon Valley company, in which I created, I would say, I think they've got 10 or 11 patents out of my work, in which I created a new type of cryptography that's usable in networks and blockchains. So I worked quite a bit, 7 days a week for a moment, with these attorneys out of Silicon Valley, just about 7 days a week at times. So that's kind of my connection to IP and my understanding of IP and what I do.
Pascal? And
Hello,
then Troy right
Deidre.
after.
And hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. I don't have any direct relation to the IP sector. I'm on the blockchain side. I'm an engineer by nature, a software engineer. And currently at the moment, I'm the CEO of Kanza Finance. It's a neobank that is backed by the blockchain, and we're focused on the African market. But I think areas where I can add some interesting views are maybe looking at things from the startup's perspective. What does it mean to protect IP, especially from the very early stages when you do not have funding, right? It's very rare for startups to start looking into legal systems and making sure they get patents and protect their business as much as possible, while at the same time they're running after VCs or investors, and at the same time they're trying to go to market. So it's so chaotic. Maybe I can bring some of that to the discussion.
Troy, and then right after, Jesse was still doing introductions. So Troy, your introduction, and then Jesse.
Okay, yeah. Hey, Deidre, the one thing I would ask next time is that I get to go first on the introductions, because I'm like the least impressive person on this panel by like an order of magnitude, and it really highlights it when you go toward the end. So just going forward, that would be nice. So look, I'm a partner at a law firm, Perkins Coie, practicing in Silicon Valley. We're very active in, in the blockchain technology. I'm obviously interested in, ways that, our community can and should be taking advantage of, that technology. Both, I mean, my main business is on the corporate side. So I represent companies and founders and investors, in kind of corporate transactions, and we've got a ton of experience in the blockchain space, and it's just I really am happy to be at this conference. I'm happy to see more and more faces that look like ours in the industry, and I think that events like this are really important to push that forward, and I'm just happy to help that.
And Jesse.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jesse Fenty. I'm an intellectual property attorney at Washington, D.C. I've known Sinclair for some time, since our time at Howard University Engineering School. This is my third time speaking at the Black Blockchain Summit. The first couple of times I spoke about just the power of blockchain for the community, but also just to note how the larger community, the big companies, the Capital Ones, the banks and different, IBMs and so on have, even though we see it as an empowerment mechanism for us, also the big companies see it and they're using it, and they're getting a lot of patents and trademarks. So My main focus is I'd like to see our people get more patents and trademarks. I'm a big champion of intellectual property. I know there's an aspect of IP for the blockchain, and we can talk about that, I guess. But I'm really a big proponent of us creating our own property. I mean, the blockchain is one way to do it, but I mean, traditional patents and trademarks are still a very powerful way of doing that, and that's something I promote. So look forward to talking to you all today about those topics.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room, because I want to hear Ram. Just jump in when you can, because it's really supposed to be like almost like a coffee table type discussion. The elephant in the room is that no matter what industry we're talking about, and technology and crypto is no exception, Black startups are the least or non-funded. So in the context of being the least and non-funded, but still innovating, what are the resources for startup founders or individuals to be able to protect their intellectual property that is not going to end up them forking over that which they innovated? So anyone can chime in and tackle that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give you the way that we think about it, you know, on the corporate side, right? So you know, when founders that we're working with are looking to put companies, you know, together and get them funded, right? Initially, there's generally, you know, not a lot of capital to have a resource intensive sort of, you know, patent kind of and you know intellectual property review on the front end, right? So what we try to do is get them to a place where you know they at least have the umbrella of the corporate protection, you know, for them as individuals. The IP gets contributed to the company. To the extent that it's patentable technology, you can get provisional patents on file, you know, for a pretty reasonable cost, which just, you know, it doesn't give you the full protection of a granted patent, but it does, you know, put a stake in the ground for a year to give you, you know, time to run. And in that time, really what you're trying to do is build something that will attract investor interest, so that you then have the capital to pursue, you know, the things that Jesse was talking about earlier, and be able to kind of close that loop. But on the front end, it's you know, the you know, what you can do without a lot of you know, without a lot of money is just sort of keep you know, keep a trade secret around it, right? So you're not disclosing it broadly. Everybody that you're communicating with, you're using NDAs, and then the provisional patent process.
Okay, so just to, you know, kind of be devil's advocate there. Now, here's a flaw in the traditional system. You know, if I'm taking something from a corporate perspective, and I'm a person that has a lot of money and likes to control everything, I could say, okay, well, you know, startup founder Pasquale, you know, tell me how your innovation works. Okay, I need to see a demo. I need to see the specs. I've signed your NDA. You know, this I'm helping you out, Pasquale. I'm going to help you because you don't know anything. You don't even know it costs a lot of money. I'm going to help you to get a provisional patent, and you try to search for funding for a year, and then a year and a day later, he runs out of time. His provisional patent is worth squat, and then that corporation now is he basically forked over everything, just trying to convince somebody to help him fundamentally, because you know, he's an engineer, he knows how things work, but in terms of the law and controlling what it works, and next thing you know, the corporation has what he innovated. I mean, we see this repeatedly happen, and we've seen it happening since day one, the real McCoy and all that kind of stuff like that. And it's actually happening in crypto also. We have cases where people, I've actually written about people who have actually, you know, basically given everything to a VC with the lure, the dangling carrot that I'm going to introduce you to so-and-so. And I know I can introduce them because you saw me on TV with that person. And the next thing you know, they cut all ties and they've gone off and they're pitching their new thing, new branding, but they're even using chunks of your pitch presentation, using your exact things. So that there's a problem with this way of which corporations have done things that I'm trying to fish out. Is there a blockchain or a crypto way to circumvent that to end that type of exploit that has been, and it is a real occurrence. It is a real occurrence. So anyone can tackle that. I don't know if Pasquale or Candy, you had anything to add to that.
I've had that experience with my intellectual property being stolen by someone I did have an NDA with. And they came after one of our shows that had some pretty major headliners. And they pretended as though they were doing us a favor. They trademarked the name of our show. And then they wound up owning, obviously, the name. And we had to try to work around it and redo it. And I was angry at myself, at my partners, because this is exactly what Prince told us was going to happen. And it did. And it just became a situation where I had to learn, people always say, oh, it's just business, it's nothing personal. But what I've really learned in my experience is everything starts with the personal. And you're getting into ultimately these relationships with people who sometimes are pretending to want to help you. They'll even use language that sounds as though they are really on your side. And then you find out their true intentions later. As to whether or not the blockchain has a way of helping people be more transparent as to what their real intentions are, I don't know. I would hope so. I would hope that there is a technological solution to that. But at the end of the day, any technology in the wrong hands can be used for good or for evil. So blockchain is most likely going to fall along that same pattern. And it really has to be a situation, for me, just learning from my own experience, it has to be about checking my gut and really trusting my own inner intuition. Because when I look back, there were signs all along. There were red flags the whole time.
So what I think it's a great question, Deidre, and I think this is certainly the topic of this panel, is whether the topic is whether blockchain can replace the traditional patent and trademark system. I think that's kind of what it gets at. And I think people think so because you can, because a blockchain can't be tampered with, and it's a record and so on. But when I look at it as an attorney, what's missing in the blockchain, what's missing to have the ability to replace the traditional IP system is the enforcement. So with a patent and a trademark and a copyright, those are legal. The federal government is creating property. When it gives you the patent right and the trademark right and the copyright ability, it's creating property. It doesn't exist as property without the federal government saying this is property. Without that, it's just a letter. It's just an invention. But the federal government is telling you this is property, and they're giving you the ability to sue for infringement on that property. So to me, the blockchain is missing that enforcement arm, and so it's a great way to keep facts. It's a great way to keep records of who invented what first, or who trademarked it, or who published a song on a certain date. It's a factual record. So it's good for evidence, for facts, which can be used in court. But to me, it doesn't replace the patent system for that very reason. But I think it has there's a lot of aspects to it, but I don't see it replacing the patent system or the trademark system. Not yet.
Possible solution would be, after the government has approved the patent, that it would be registered. As an example, land registration, real estate registration is done on the blockchain all the time. So once it's approved officially, then it could be registered on the blockchain, so that, it would make it very difficult for someone to try to change that ledger or say otherwise. Now, it's registered on the patent system. It's registered by the federal government as a patent. They have the official records to say this is a patent, and it's granted on October 21st, 1992. That's the official record. I mean, so it's one additional layer, and I think they can work together. And then the patent office themselves, they could adopt blockchain for their own records. So they could adopt blockchain, so they wouldn't be competing with the patent office, because the patent office could easily adopt it as one more way. So I'm not saying, so I think there's this notion out there that it could somehow replace the patent system. I don't see it right now.
But see, Jesse, now you're making a case for why software developers like Pasquale, many of them, and I'm not saying Pasquale, I'm going to ask him his opinion in a minute, but this is why they advocate for undoxed teams, that you don't know who the team is. Because if I've invented something and I put it out there and I've already had it in the structure that my team is quote unquote the owner, not really that they're getting a majority, but they're getting a significant chunk as an early or creative team or a team that's developing stuff. So now you come along and you say, well, I had a patent to that and I'm going to sue. Who are you going to sue? You don't even know who it is. So you're, by saying that this is a flaw that we have in the intellectual property system, but the benefit is that, well, you could sue, but we're saying that intellectual property climate, the culture, and it's not everyone, but it's a significant number of people, and especially when it comes to Black people, people of color, when anything other than cisgendered white men, the fact that we're being victimized is kind of like a, oh, well scenario. It's business, it's whatever. So now you have on the software end, you have a situation where people can develop products and protocols on the blockchain, but maybe I'm not even going to tell you who the team is. I'm going to just work on the dev end, get it out there, have different random teams marketing. They don't know who it is. They're getting these bounties. They're interfacing with the network. Now what's the scenario? What's the circumstance? Now you kind of, because there's no clear solution to this IP, travesty that as continually victimizes Black people and a whole bunch of other isms of people. Now you're almost saying that you're giving a green light to these undoxed, these unknown teams pushing and producing content out there and just completely circumventing and not doing the government registrations at all. Would you agree or disagree with that statement?
Well, I mean, there's a lot in what you said. I mean, a patent can be always invalidated later on. And there's a whole big thing about invalidating patents, that someone comes before to say that something was in the public record ahead of time. I mean, there's a lot to what you said. In terms of victimizing the Black community, I think, I don't want to hog the mic, but I think, like Troy made some comments. To me, it's education. So I do a lot of education work with the National Society of Black Engineers, teaching IP to the engineers. So a lot of it is education. I mean, it's not only the Black people get victimized, white people get victimized, Asian people get victimized. I mean, the uneducated and unpowerful will always get victimized. I mean, that's just a part of the system, the world that we're living in. And so you can, forums like this, or we're out there to educate people and network and do things, but you can never stop victimization. I mean, that just goes on all the time, but you can inform people and educate. You know how the traditional system works, and you try to find alternatives, and you do both. It's not always one or the other. It's what you said was very powerful, but then the traditional system is also very powerful. And so there's the mainstream and there's the fringe, and it's not one or the other. Maybe it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I think essentially that it is the belief that even though Sinclair differs and says Satoshi is a Black woman, but it is a belief that Bitcoin is born from the victimization of white men of other white men. But on a scale of victimization, Black people are victimized more than even the least of white men. There's a certain amount of privilege in that. So my thing is, how do you save the current system, or how do you merge the current system in that incentivizes developers like Pasquale and others to actually integrate with the current system versus going rogue and renegade? Because the message that I'm receiving from, and Troy can correct me in a minute, and then I definitely want to get to Pasquale because he hasn't had a chance to speak. But you're saying, well, victimization is par for the course, so live with it. And we're saying, no, I just don't want to be victimized anymore. And it's not just us; it's predominantly white men who are driving this ecosystem. So it's white men that actually, you can't deny that it's these white libertarians who, whether it's a perception or reality, and I actually think it's a reality because you're dealing with a circumstance in which people not going to certain schools are discriminating against other white men who haven't gone to those schools. So yeah, how do we save the system, basically, what I'm saying.
Okay, so there's a lot there to unpack. Let me just start from saying that, like, I'm talking about this in a very narrow sense, right? Like, so I've been in Silicon Valley 20 plus years. Like, so I don't want to speak to Candy's experience in Hollywood or kind of the music business or anything like that, right? Because all those things, there's different there's different kind of approaches there. But like in Silicon Valley, the sort of innovation and thievery go hand in hand. Like, it just is the reality of the way that people iterate on ideas, right? And it's not there's a debate, right, about how much of the value in any organization comes from the original kind of concept versus the execution that happens to deliver the concept and monetize it, right? So to me, right, you ask about how kind of our people can really protect themselves. I think Jesse hit it on the head, right? There's a lot of education that goes into it, and it's really nuanced, right? So it's like, if you think about being an engineer and somebody sort of right, violating an NDA and then going off and kind of starting their company, right? If they're in the fundraising process, maybe you're daunted by the prospect of a long litigation. But the reality is that a well-timed sort of nastygram, which is a legal letter. Jesse's probably has probably written and received a bunch of those on behalf of his clients that basically says, hey, just a heads up that you're knowingly violating our kind of intellectual property rights. That can put a cramp on a company's financing and can bring them to the table in terms of negotiating a settlement and kind of getting compensation for the for the idea, if you will. So I do think there is a lot of education that can help through that process.
Pascal, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just a few things. We've been in a fundraising mode in the last 4 months. So there's definitely, I mean, I would speak to a lot of startups like myself, meaning Black founders or African founders of African descent. We kind of feel a lot of vulnerability because first you have one struggle, which is in order for your business to grow or your idea to grow or take it to the next level, you need funding. But in order to convince those that hold the largest amount of venture capital, you have to be willing to expose yourself, right? And to be honest with you, like Jesse, Troy, and Rob mentioned, we don't know what we're exposing ourselves to. We don't have the knowledge or education of how we can actually treat that relationship, right, to make sure that we're not absorbing any risk. And to be honest, it's quite difficult. There's no straight answer to it. I can speak to what a lot of startups are doing now. We are adopting a lot of the open, I would say open software concept, where basically people come together and they work together. There isn't really a motive to privatize the innovation. There's more of a motive to create a community of people that are going to keep building on it, right? That's kind of a way to not get stuck in the realms of trying to build and at the same time protect. To be honest with you, I think that's where a lot of the founders like myself are geared towards. Maybe it might be generational as well. We're looking at things like, why should I have this innovation and keep it in my pocket? Why I can, expose it and it could be millions of people working on it, right? And at that point, yeah, there's still some intellectual property factors that might come up, but you're not in a position where you're as compromised as someone that is trying to privatize it as much. But I think I agree with Jesse 100%. It's all about education, honestly. And I think the challenge we face in our community is, where are and this is actually something which a question I was going to ask the panel, because I think it would help a lot of startups out there, because we do have innovative people in our communities. In the last 4 months, especially being in Africa for about 2 months, I've seen all sorts of innovation. And I would really like to ask the panel, what resources are out there, right, at the minimum, where technical founders can start their journey towards understanding, how do I protect myself in this journey of expanding my business, and at the same time not trying to expose it to people that might take advantage of it?
We have about 2 minutes. So who wants to tackle that?
Well, there's not a lot. So I work in this space. I work in the IP education space, and I started a nonprofit called Endless IP, ENDLS IP. to start to do this. And I went to a few conferences around the country, and even the white folks know, they know that this isn't taught across the country. So there's a big dearth. There's a big a gap in knowledge. I mean, so in my opinion, patent law. So I'm an engineer and an attorney, and to me, like, patent law should be taught in engineering school, but it isn't. So you got thousands and thousands of engineers across the country, across the world, who don't know about patents. But patents are engineering documents. So that there's a huge lack of education. It's not targeted towards anybody, but there's a paper that came out called Lost Einsteins that said white people, even though they're not taught this, like we're not taught it, they have connections. And so for the fundraising, Zuckerberg, he didn't know about patents when he copied Facebook or invented Facebook, Bill Gates and so on, but they just know people, you know? And so that's just the big thing. That's they got us under a rock. They got us here 400 years ago. We're still trying to catch up, you know? So we have the network. I mean, we can come out with a pamphlet out of this summit. We all got together and wrote up a pamphlet and sent it out to people and sent it out to other people. We have to do it ourselves, you know? I mean, there's information out there on the Patent Office website. There's information in certain places, but it's not out there for all of us. So we have to do it ourselves.
Yeah, there's you know, it's funny. Gates, his dad, I think, was a lawyer. You know, when Zuckerberg went to Harvard, right? You can't throw a rock without hitting a lawyer at that place. So it's, you know, they had, you know, they were in environments where the lack of knowledge wasn't, you know, they had, you know, they had opportunities. There's different incubator programs that you could look at. You know, one that we work with is the Founder Institute, where there will be a module on, you know, kind of protection of intellectual property as part of, you know, their education process for, you know, for founders. You know, and that's just one, but there's a bunch of them, you know, that are, you know, right, pretty well known. Y Combinator is another one out in Silicon Valley. Like, so, yeah, I mean, I'd encourage you to kind of look at those, because that might be a good way to both help you conceptualize these, you know, kind of the IP stuff, as well as help with fundraising.
Thank you all. This was way too short. I will be touching base with a few of you behind the scenes as well, especially Rob, because I know someone in your quantum realm whose provisional parent is about to expire. So thank you all for contributing. I don't think we were able to solve it, but definitely if a takeaway is that a group of people get together and just write a primer, just with resources listing, nothing like a one-pager document that can be sent out or just made available through the Black Blockchain Summit website. It's as a total resource material. I think that would be helpful, because yeah, that's one of the areas that is a weak link, and people are afraid to talk because everyone seems to know someone who's had their intellectual property taken from them. So thank you all for your contributions.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Are we closing?
Yeah, we're closing. We're about to start the next panel. We have like about a couple of seconds.
Oh, I just wanted to throw out a little bit of caution when it comes to those incubator programs, only because there was a huge, HBO put out a big call saying that they were looking for Black writers. Because, oh, you know, theory goes, if we have more Black writers writing stories, then we have greater access to a Black perspective. So HBO launches this writing program. And if I hadn't had my Howard education and could read a contract, I would have had my intellectual property stolen. Because as I read it, I realized that in there was a clause that said just by submission alone, just by submitting my idea to them, they owned it. And that I would not be able to produce the project myself later, because it would then become property of HBO. And had I not read it and understood what I was giving up in order to get associated with this network, and then I found out later that they were in talks with Issa Rae at the same time, and what they were really doing was taking out the competition and making sure that they would be able to put her on a pedestal and make sure someone like me would not ever be able to be the other Issa, because there can only be one at a time, right? So I just wanted Huh?
Yeah, one Denzel Washington, one
there
Issa.
Can only
Yeah,
be one at a
it's been discussed. One at a time. Only taking one of you. That's
Hollywood
great.
people, yeah, you can't trust them. I will say the Silicon Valley incubators don't do that.
I don't know about that. I
Yeah,
got some stuff. There's some reasons why I wrote some articles that I wrote with certain people at the time that I wrote them, so they could be time stamped. So then when those coming out of the VC funding came out with their product and say, see, that's a copy of what I wrote like 3 months ago. It's pervasive across all industries. And
Oh
that's,
yeah,
that's
no, I
I've seen no
understand that.
difference. I've seen no difference between Silicon Valley and what Jenny was talking about. I see no
Yeah.
difference.
unfortunate.
No, I'm just
Unfortunate.
saying with respect to the incubator contracts very narrowly, because I've looked at them for, Y Combinator Founder Institute, like they do not take ownership of the intellectual property of the founders that participate.
Yeah, but the VCs there fish and take. So what's the difference? There are VCs there that are fishing and taking from what came out of a Binance developer thing, and you gave everything away, including the farm, and it's hooked you with this VC, and then they go dark, like like a ghosting of a dating situation, and next thing you know, 3 months later, they're launching the exact same thing that came out 6 months ago at some of these incubators. And that,
Yep.
I mean, it's just a different way of doing the same business, which is bad business. So we definitely haven't solved the problem, but we definitely have to keep having these conversations. There's going to be has to be a merger for survival. Otherwise, everything is going to go haywire in the future. People are going to start closing down. I really like what Pascal had to say, because I am aware of open law, and it's almost an extension of the open source movement, that you're better together if a group of people are running off the same type and building off the same type of software that's more sustainable in some respects, unfortunately. Okay, so we're going to get started with the next panel. Thank you all, Candy, Rob, Jesse, Troy, and Pasquale.
All right.